Welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Miller, and I'm so excited to bring this show to you. Show Me the Way is a podcast dedicated to exploring the journeys of those who have faced adversity and found themselves on unexpected paths. We will have meaningful, thoughtful conversations about challenges we have faced and how we discovered and forged new direction. Prepare to be inspired and to uncover your own strength as you listen to relatable and motivating stories. Life has a way of twisting and turning, and we often need a fresh perspective to understand how to navigate. Let's show each other the way. In today's episode, I sit down with Chip Sholz, someone I connected with through an online podcast networking community. You know how certain people just stand out? Chip was one of those for me. After reading his profile, I knew he would bring something special to the show, and he absolutely did. As I always say, everyone has a story, and Chip has many. While a major healthcare event significantly altered the course of his life years ago, what stands out most is his perspective. Instead of focusing on one defining moment, Chip reflects on the many bumps and grinds along the way, the small, everyday decisions that ultimately shape the direction of our lives. This conversation is a little different from most. Rather than centering on one specific turning point, Chip shares meaningful insights and examples from across his life, offering powerful reminders about growth, resilience, and intention. Chip is a husband, a father of 3 girls, a coach who truly values relationships, and someone with a deep passion for wood turning. He's also an accomplished author, and in this episode, he shares the inspiration behind his books, along with plenty of wisdom listeners can take with them. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Chip, and I know you will too. Welcome back to the Show Me the Way podcast. Today's guest is someone I met through a matching site online. Let me tell you, I've said it a million times, everyone has a story. Everyone has something to say. And Chip Sholz caught my attention because although he's been through a major health scare, he focuses on all the bumps in the road. The things that make us take turns or follow paths that we didn't know we would take and we didn't know would be part of our future, and how all of these things, these bumps in the road, shape us in the course of our lives. Chip and I spoke, and right away I knew he'd be a great fit for the Show Me the Way podcast. He's a calming presence with a lot of nuggets. You've heard me say that many times on the podcast. I had a guest say, leave nuggets with people. And I know that is what Chip is going to do with us today. When we started talking before, he immediately jumped in and we had a great conversation. So I just know that we're all going to learn a lot from him. I'm really grateful that he is on the show with us. So welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast, Chip.
Andrew, it is such a pleasure. I've had this on the calendar for a little while, and I was really looking forward to our conversation because I really enjoyed the conversation that we had in the pre-interview. So thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I really enjoyed that too. It was like we've known each other for a while. So I'm certain this is going to be a great interview. But before we jump into the overall conversation, why don't we hear a little bit more about you from your own words?
Yeah, where I stand in my life at this point is married, 3 daughters, 3 beautiful grown daughters that keep me young and keep me moving. The kind of interesting thing is that I've got one daughter that works for me. I've got another daughter that is a business partner of my wife's. She runs a property management business, and then my youngest daughter works for a payroll company, and they're all within about a half an hour of us, and so it's great. But in my spare time, I do some wood turning. I'm really heavily involved in wood turning, teaching wood turning, and that kind of thing. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm an executive coach for a living, but that becomes less and less important, doesn't it?
Yes, that's for sure. The older we get, yeah, perspective for sure. Well, I love that. I think that's probably, we said this on the phone, another reason why I clicked with you is because my dad has 3 daughters too. So I can definitely
Hmm.
relate. I just wish we all lived within a half hour of one another. Actually, this last week, I was on spring break with my son and my husband, my younger son and my husband, and we spent time with my parents and my 2 sisters. It was the first time in quite a while that all 5 of us have been together. So it was wonderful, but it doesn't happen enough. So, and you live in North Carolina, right?
Yep, just outside of Charlotte, west side of Lake Norman.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people on if they've been listening to this podcast, they know I've been talking about my parents moving to North Carolina. So, yeah, a lot of parallels here. They are moving in a few weeks, I think next month. Yeah.
Yeah, where did you tell
So,
me they were moving?
not too far from Hickory, we would fly into Charlotte if we
Yeah.
were to visit. Yeah.
Well, and the
So,
North Carolina Woodturners Association is in Hickory, and so I'm at
oh,
Hickory all the
okay.
time. So, you know,
Wow. We'll have to introduce you guys.
you will have to
Maybe
introduce me.
you, yeah, maybe you could teach my dad how to wood turn. Now, tell us, I think I kind of understand it, but for our listeners, tell us more what wood turning means.
Well, wood turning is using a tool called the lathe, and a lathe basically is a motor that spins wood. And when you're spinning the wood, you use gouges or some people call them knives, but they're gouges or chisels to shape the wood. And so the one thing I love about the lathe is that I've learned over the years that our minds relax around things that are round. If you think about it, don't you love to take a walk out in the neighborhood and a walk out in nature? Well, the reason you do is because there are no square corners in nature. They're all
Yeah, that's
round, and
interesting.
and
Yeah.
even if you're looking at a cliff face, it's certainly not a straight, a square. Whereas in our built environments, everything is square. Everything, we look at the corners of the rooms, and then it's all square. And there's ample evidence that round things that are asymmetrical, are extremely relaxing to the mind. So when you're working on a lathe, there's nothing that you can make. There's a few things like square bowls that you can make, but I just never liked the concept of square bowl. But most of the things that you make are round. So if you're making a mallet, just a simple mallet, it's round, and a bowl is round, and a pepper mill is round, and all of that kind of stuff. It's impossible to make a square thing most of the time on a lathe. And so I think people really appreciate bespoke items that they can pick up and handle, and that are smooth to the touch. And I love working on it because it creates those round things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now I'm going to have my eye out all the time for round things and I'll see how that affects me. That's so interesting. Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you explained that a little bit more. Thank you. Sounds like you keep busy, but you do things that bring you joy. So I love that. But yeah, like I said in my intro, I am sure, and I know from my years, but the older we get, the more stories we can share. So yes, we can focus on a specific point in time. When I started this Show Me the Way podcast, it was specifically because, as I told you before, my younger son, I've got two sons. My younger son was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy when he was 5. He's 16 now. And I was younger back then and I had a plan and it did not include one of my children having this progressive muscle wasting disorder that would really change everything that I wanted to do. I soon after he was diagnosed determined I wanted to be his sole caregiver. I determined I wasn't going to work in corporate anymore. I made so many different decisions based on this one point in time and it
Yeah,
just altered how my path looked for the rest of my life and it did the same for my husband and my other son and just everyone in our family. And I haven't dealt with a lot of adversity like that. So it really was eye opening and perspective changing. And every day, he's 16, like I said, I learn from him on how to do things, how to look out for things, how to do things differently. You look for accessibility. I never paid attention to any of that before. So it really just changes your mindset when you have to take a right instead of a left. And I knew that soon as I started talking about my experience with my son, other people had similar stories, maybe not a medical diagnosis, but oh, yes, when I had to make this change, it altered everything in my life. And I do like how you mentioned, yeah, I've had a health scare, I've had different things happen, but there's all kinds of little bumps and grinds you said in your profile that really alter how you look at life and how you move through life and where you are today. So I'm interested in hearing your story. It goes quite along with what I'm trying to do with this podcast, just show people that, yeah, you might have to deal with adversity. You might have to make a change in that specific path that you thought you were going to be on. And what does that look like? And how have you learned from it? What perspective have you gained? And I've learned so much from my guests. We've had people talk about medical situations, grief, moving from one state to another, having children when they didn't expect it, all kinds of different stories. There's just something that everybody has to share, and we can all learn from one another. And like I said in my intro, we're definitely going to learn from you. So I am going to turn the mic over and let you share whatever's on your heart. I tell my listeners we don't have a script. So I'm anxious to hear what
Well,
path you're going to lead us on.
Andrea, as you look back, and assumedly your looking back is not quite as far as my looking back, but as you're looking back, is there anything you really regret?
That's a great question. I mean, you can regret a few things like, oh, I was mean to this person in high school, or oh, I don't like the dress I wore at my wedding, or something like that. But would I have traded anything to not have my second son? No way. I mean, I cannot imagine life without him in it, or at least being part of my life. He has shaped everything. He's taught my older son so much. My older son has empathy more so than maybe others that don't have a sibling in a wheelchair. He's very understanding and very forgiving, and he just has this heart that not that other kids his age don't have, but he just has this very different way of looking at things. It actually fortunately brought my husband and I closer. I know that doesn't always happen.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel like, and I've told my listeners this a couple of times, I don't call this a faith-based podcast, but I definitely like to bring in my faith when I can, and I just feel like this was God's plan, and it may not make sense all the time why my son is going through what he's going through, but I certainly was supposed to be on the path that I'm on.
The reason I ask you that question is because I always like to hear the answer to that. And I feel much the same way. There are things I would have changed. I had a starter marriage that lasted 10 months, and I probably would have changed that. But I look back, and the things that make us who we are the things that have happened to us. And one of the things that you learn from coaching and coaching, I've been coaching almost 30 years, is that I can't control what happens to me. The only thing I can control is how I react to it. And so, look, there have been all kinds of bumps and grinds and misfortunes, and call them whatever you want. I got laid off in May of '98 from a job that I really enjoyed, but it was one of those jobs that was kind of soul sucking towards the end. And that launched me in a completely different direction. That got me to move from LA to North Carolina. My whole family eventually moved. My girls, we brought one with us, and two of them followed shortly thereafter. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't had that door close. Oh yeah, but a door opened as well as the door closing. So it was funny. My wife asked me the other day, which we've been married for 42 years, and she asked me, "Do you regret marrying me?" Which I thought was a really interesting question. Um, and I immediately said, "No, not at all. I am so glad I did." And because she saved me in so many ways. Um, it saved me from myself. So it's all those bumps and grinds that at the time seem horrible, but in retrospect, it's not a well. You mentioned the stroke. Um, would I have liked to not have had the stroke? Well, probably. Did I change everything after the stroke? Yes. I lost 110 pounds. I changed the way I think about things. It certainly changed my meaning and purpose in what I do. Um, So would I rather have had it? No, it was a great inflection point. It was so much uh, that changed the course of what I'm doing today.
Did you have any health issues before that? Like, did you kind
Oh
of
God, yes.
feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you
I
were
was
going in that direction anyway?
well, I weighed almost 350 pounds. Uh, I had diabetes. I had high blood pressure. I had, you know, increased cholesterol. My parents died early. My dad was 51. My mom was 56 when they died. I was an orphan at 30. That gets in your head, and so I didn't really take care of myself. I worked unbelievable hours. If I look at the time, so I was probably about 13 years into my business when I had the stroke. But I was running and gunning. I was spending 200 nights a year in a hotel room. I was on more damned airplanes. I mean, there was one week that I remember pretty clearly where I was in Newark on Monday and Atlanta on Tuesday and Dallas on Wednesday and LA on Thursday and back home. Um, that takes a toll. And the stroke was a reset. I was 27 days shy of the age when my mother died when I had the stroke. And you got a choice. And the choice is you can either do something about it, and thank God it was a mild stroke. Um, eh, it was it was worth recovering because it took me a couple months to recover, but it was better than if I was completely disabled. Um, so, what do you take away from that? I never had a woe is me moment. I never had. Well, I had one. Kind of looked at you spoke about God, and I looked up at God and said, "Why me?" And then I got over it because God finally said, "Hey, you're in it because you learned it. You learned something from it." So that's really the lesson from that. But yeah, I had a whole raft of. I found out I was diabetic when I was about 30 years old, and that was a cause of. And I know it now is sleep deprivation. I was only sleeping 5 hours a night. I was a road warrior in LA, and so
Yeah, so many factors. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking there are so many people out there like that. That travel more than they probably should, or they don't fit in the body movement, and they don't always eat right. They're on the road, they're working, and Americans just work and work and work, and they just keep the hustle thing going so often. So, geez, just listening to you for 10 minutes, I'm thinking there's a lot of people that could definitely relate, I'm sure.
well, yeah, yeah, and when you're in the middle of it, you don't think about it. Because you're providing for your family or building your cred or whatever you're doing, but you don't think about it. And I look back and I think of all the meals I missed. I think of all the times I missed. There there is a thought about regret, um, where you choose a path. I chose a path that was leaving my hometown and starting on a new adventure. So, I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, and it was a great place to grow up. A lot of friends, high school, and I went to college in Illinois. But I got out, and my father had always told me, because he had grown up around his siblings and his parents. He said, "Get out, go see the world. Don't get trapped in the Chicago area like I did." And I took it to heart. My brother took it to heart. My brother lived in China for 30 years, but I went from there to Atlanta, Atlanta to Charlotte, Charlotte to Tampa, Tampa to LA, and LA back to Charlotte. And we've been in Charlotte about 30 years. You pay a price, and the price you pay is that you lose that connection, and you get some of it back on Facebook these days. You can keep in touch with the high school people that you forgot you knew, but all of a sudden show up in your feed. Um, but you pay that price, and so the one path is stay in your hometown, stay with your support systems. Um, well, my parents died early. Most of my family is not in the Chicago area anymore, and so what would I've had? Maybe a bunch of friends. Do I miss having a regular game of golf on a Saturday morning with a regular group? Yeah, I kind of do, but I don't miss it enough to have not had all of the great experiences I've had traveling and seeing different things. Does that make any sense to you?
It really does. And, I always say this, and not again, not to make this a faith-based episode, but I always say that God like puts people in my life and creates these episodes like with time with certain timing in mind. Everything is so timed because you're really making me think a lot about my parents that I mentioned are moving, and my sisters and I just we question it and we think, why are you doing this in your 70s? But I like what you said. Like, you really put that into perspective for me. Like, yeah, you might form these roots, you might have these groups of people that maybe you'll miss. But on the other hand, like, life is short. Why not try something new and be open to new experiences as well and create new memories? So
Well,
I
and
like
see,
that.
Andrea, you can come down and visit me.
There,
You know,
exactly. We can meet in person. That would be
that's
great.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, you're giving me a good perspective for what I see ahead with them. I've stayed in Michigan my whole life, and you do think like, what would it have been like if we moved to another state or tried something different? And even doing this podcast, I am one to be like, just try it, seat of your pants, jump into things. So I support that. But on the other hand, I've stayed in the same state my whole life. But I really like that you said that, what you were saying, because it made sense and it made me think about my parents' move a little bit more. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's all a choice, and like I said, I do miss having that cadre of close friends. But I also know one thing about myself, and that is I'm not sure I want to do what I'd have to do to be a friend. I really value my family time. I enjoy the time I spend with my kids and my wife. Being a friend is exhausting.
And too, I've seen it with my parents and with my in-laws. I'm very fortunate. I have all four with us still. It's almost like you worry like, "Oh, when they retire, are they gonna like each other?" And I'm happy to report on both sides, it almost seems like that's the person that they enjoy being with the most. It's like, "Well, this is my friend. This is my best friend, so as long as we're together, we're good." So,
That's
I
right.
appreciate that too, that they just they're fine with each other. So, I like that. So, what got you into I'm interested, what got you into coaching and what types of things do you work with your clients on?
First of all, the way I got into it was blind dumb luck. Um, when I got laid off in LA, I knew that I didn't want to work for anybody else, and I wanted to hang my own shingle. I'd also I'd done radio in my past. I've done stage work. I've done a lot of public speaking. So I thought that speaking in public and working with groups would be a good way to go. And I had a little bit of training and development in my background as well. So I originally thought about being a motivational speaker, and there's a problem with that. Um, you may get booked. Some of the good ones get booked probably 20 or 30 times a year, and the top ones make 50 or $100,000 per talk. Um, but you pay a price, and the price you pay is that you fly into Kansas City and give your 2 hours talk, and you're getting all this love while you're on stage in the 2 hours, and then you walk off and people pat you on the back and say great job, and then you go back to your hotel room and sit and eat Cheetos and watch bad TV, and so there's no relationship in that. And so I really I wanted to create relationships. I wanted to keep long-term clients, and that's worked out. I mean, I'm one client I've been working with for 17, 18 years. Another one's over 20 years, and so the relationships were the important thing to me. And what I found in coaching, so I was introduced by coaching by my first coach, and I didn't know he was a first coach until he said he was the first coach. He was just a guy that we were in trying to figure out business, and he was like 6 months ahead of me. And he introduced me to coaching, which said, "Hey, you can sit in your living room and talk to people all over the country, and they pay you." That's how I got involved in coaching, and I also do classes for companies and things like that. One of the companies that I've worked with for a long time, we just started the 17th year of doing the leadership class.
I like what you said about creating relationships. I'm a realtor, and that's the part I like the best too. It's not so much that I love HGTV and can walk in a house and see this vision. It's more that I want to create relationships and help people reach their goals. So I like that a lot. When you said motivational, that's a really good point that you make trade offs. But what made you believe like I can motivate people? I have the words, I have the things to say to help someone find motivation.
Well, that changes over the years. I mean, I had spent a number of years in management and leadership, and I thought I was good at it. I knew I was better at it when I got into my own business. Words have power, and you put the right words together in the right way. If you're able to tell a story in a really good way, then words have a lot of power. And I've always been able to uh, I've always been able to see some resonance with the people that I'm talking to, in whether it be in a class or in a group of 600 people.
Yeah, I like that. I wrote down words have power. That's true. Really interested in the coaching side of things. I know a couple of coaches and then, you hear them and I mean, it's similar to what you're doing now. You share your experiences and people think, "Oh, okay, I can learn from that." So, were you a coach? Were you saying you had your business going before the stroke?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you were already coaching people. How did things change? Like after I know a lot of things changed, but after you had that stroke, like how did your perspective even with your business change?
I think became a much better coach because so much. It was a reset. It was a complete reset, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It was a complete reset. And so I don't know if I sent you the book. I think I probably did, but that's why I wrote Small Decisions, Big Shifts, because it's my coaching philosophy. And oh yeah, my coaching philosophy gelled a lot afterwards because I lived it, and I lived it in some pretty critical ways. And some pretty critical ways are, look, my context was what what was my physical condition, what was my mental condition. The one thing they don't talk about with strokes is emotions, and it really screws up your emotions. I would cry at every commercial that had puppies in it. It was just ridiculous. Boy, remember the Sally Struther, or the commercials with the pets, that looked so forlorn, and in the
Mhm.
arms of
Yeah.
an
Yes,
angel.
the Sarah McLachlan commercials, yes.
Oh,
Those'll get
geez.
you, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Just turned into a ball of tears. Um,
Mhm.
so they don't talk about that, and I think that really helped me be a better coach. Is that all of a sudden you don't want to make adversity a hook, but adversity can be, and it's just it's a lot better understanding. Now, the one thing about coaching, and if you're a really good coach, you spend more of your time asking questions than you do telling stories. But storytelling is a big part of that, because what I say in the coaching realm is, somebody has a situation. I'll say, "Hey, do you mind if I tell you a story about the situation, and here's the way I handled it. I'm not saying you should handle it this way, but maybe my story can help loosen something up in your mind.
Right. Yeah. You said adversity, you don't want to make it a hook. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily a hook. It's just that you don't really understand how much going through something alters your outlook on life. I mean, people will say
Mm,
it like, "Oh, well, you haven't been through this, so you might not see it from my perspective." So, sharing how you dealt with that adversity, I think is just so helpful and such a teaching moment. So, I do appreciate the asking questions and the interest in obviously your clients, but by sharing your experiences, they can say, "Oh, I'm not alone. I've been through something like that. He's been through something like that. So now I feel like I can relate."
yes. And by the way, you were mentioning realtor. I think we talked about this as well. I live with a couple of realtors, and I'm kind of in that world as well. My wife runs a property management business out of the back of the house. I run the coaching business out of the front of the
Oh, the
house,
front.
and yeah, yeah. So we're kind of a all work at home business as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes it nice. My husband works for a corporation, but fortunately gets to work from home. I don't know if he always likes that. I think he misses the office a little bit, but always had that kind of option. And then with the pandemic, it became a regular thing. So he had to get used to it, but it is nice to have him here. And then when I'm not showing houses or taking care of my child, I'm here. So if we need to do something or if I need him to help me with my son or if there's something, it's nice to have him here. It's nice to both be home for sure. So I want to get back to you've written a couple of books, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I
5.
definitely 5. Okay. I definitely want to
Yeah.
talk about those, but the one thing that hit me, I'm taking notes here as you're talking. You said small decisions, big shifts. What are some examples of your small decisions? What do you consider a small decision?
There's hundreds of them. There's hundreds of them
Mhm.
every day, whether we get up in the morning and decide what we're gonna put on to wear for the day, or, what we're gonna eat for breakfast. I eat pretty much the same thing for breakfast just about every morning, when I'm home, and so I guess I haven't made that decision, or yes, maybe I have made that decision to eat the same thing every day. But, if you take a look at one of the big shifts is moving from Los Angeles to North Carolina. Yeah, that's a big shift, but there's hundreds of decisions that go along with that, and even the mode of transport. Did we decide to take a travel trailer for a month and a half with 5 cats, 2 dogs, and 3 humans, all the way across the country? Well, it didn't start off that way. We'd always thought about driving across country, but we never thought about driving in a travel trailer. And that decision came about because um, we found out that transporting 5 cats and 2 dogs cross country, putting them in a kennel and doing it that way was going to be hugely expensive and not particularly fair to the animals. And so that led us to, okay, let's buy a travel trailer. So we went and bought a travel trailer. We bought a used travel trailer, and we picked it up in El Monte, California, and it was about 30 miles from where we lived. We had a Toyota RAV4 at the time, and we got there. It was all hitched. We put the hitches on it and all that kind of stuff. Had everything with the bars and all that stuff. And we picked up the trailer and started going across the 30 miles to home, and it liked to kill us. I mean, it was the whole thing was bouncing around, and the Rav4 just wasn't built to handle a 19-foot travel trailer. So that led to another decision, which meant we got to trade in this truck and get another one. And so we bought a used Explorer. And so then, when we got on the road, we had a decision we had to make about where we were going to stop. And oh, by the way, um, for the first for the first couple of hours, we rode with the cats in cat carriers in the back of the Explorer. Um, they would not shut up. I mean, they were screaming the whole time. So we ended up putting them in the travel trailer. Well, we're in the middle of July, and we're going through the Nevada desert. And so now that leads to another way of another decision, which says, okay, we can't drive for more than a couple hours every day because we have to cool the trailer down and get them in the trailer and make sure that we hook it up and get it going and get the air conditioning on so we don't kill them because of the heat. It's all the small decisions that make it. It's not just it's I read something the other day that talked about the tyranny of goals. And everybody is told that SMART goals are the way: specific, measurable, attainable, realistically high, and timely. Well, that's really tyrannical, and usually those aren't connected to our life's definition of a success. And so we have a really difficult time with that. How does that fit into my long term definition of success? When I think of success, I'll ask you the question. So, what is success for you?
Well, that goes into what I'm doing with this podcast. Success when I was younger is way different than it is now. When you're younger, you have these plans and you think, okay, my husband and I met in college and we're going to both graduate. We're going to buy a house. We're going to have these jobs and we're just going to keep climbing the corporate ladder. And then we're going to have these children and they're going to do the same thing that we did when we were kids and everything's going to be great. But now first of all, I don't look past like 3 days. But second, it's is there joy in my life? Are my children comfortable and happy and are they finding joy? Is my husband allowing his job to completely stress him out or is he finding some joy? So I think it's more about success now is where's the joy in your life? Do you have it? Are the people around you happy? Overall, are you guys in a good family situation? Are you enjoying time together? I just think that is so much more important to me now than before. Obviously, you want to, have the house and have money and, allow your kids to go to school or whatever they want to do. But I just think finding the joy, going after the joy and doing it together as a family is more important to me than anything else.
Well, Andrea, I ask this question of all my coaching clients. I ask them to define success for me in a lot of different ways. Every class I run, I ask them to define success for me. And what I find is that they never talk about the house or the car or the boat or whatever. They always talk about a great family or happiness or joy or financial freedom. They do bring up financial freedom, but when they talk about career, it's not having a great job. It's being respected, it's being trusted, it's those things. So if you take a look at I would say the most common responses that I've heard over the years, very similar to yours. A healthy family, so health is one of them. Great family, successful marriage, launch the kids, financial freedom. Now you put that in the frame of this is a lifelong pursuit, because you're not happy at 40 and all of a sudden you check the box and you move on to something else, right? And what makes you happy at 40 doesn't make you happy at 50, doesn't make you happy at 60. So it's really thinking about what are those long-term, I don't even call them goals, the overarching, here's my definition of success. Now, how am I going to get there? And how am I going to, and I use this thing called waypoints. Um, how are you going to use waypoints along the way? Do you know what a waypoint is?
I was going to ask you to describe that.
Okay, so a waypoint in navigation is just a point that you turn. So if I'm flying, if I'm using a GPS and I'm flying from uh, uh, Florida to LA, I don't fly directly Florida to LA. I fly through a number of waypoints. And a waypoint is strictly a turning point. So if you think about the journey to success, if you say, okay, a great family is my measure of success and it's a lifelong pursuit, what are the waypoints along the way? And some of the waypoints are planned, and some of them are unexpected. You had an unexpected one.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it because you're right. None of our paths are straight. There's always a left or a right or a curve or oh, there's a detour. You've got to do something different. I just think it's funny when you're young, at least me, I didn't really think like that. I
Yeah.
saw a straighter line back then. Do you think that's the case for most young people still?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is. I've often said when I first got involved in this and first started learning about the materials and all that kind of stuff, I often said, gee, I wish I had known this when I was 25.
Right.
The trouble is, you weren't ready to hear it when you were 25.
Exactly. You really
It
can't think
takes,
that way.
yeah, it takes a couple of the bumps and grinds along the way to get there. And I don't think I would have. One of my favorite sayings is "Semper Gumby." Do you know what that means?
No.
Semper is always. So
Yes,
if Semper
that's like the
Fidelis is,
Marines. That's
yes,
like the Marines, yeah.
yeah, Semper is always. And Gumby, have you ever seen
It's the
Gumby?
character
This,
Gumby. That's
yeah,
where I thought you were going, yes.
yeah.
So
Well,
always be flexible?
yes, yes, yes. Always flexible, and so being always flexible is a great way to live, and I don't think I would have been able to say that when I was 25.
No, me either, and gosh, I love that. I'm gonna get my son a Gumby because I always say with him, like, we do things Nathan's way. His name is Nathan, and it's like yes, you can do these things, but they have to be done in a different way. So he has shown me how, now he's not always flexible because there's not much in his life he can control. So he holds on to the few things that he can. So I wouldn't call him flexible, but he is good at saying, I'm going to do this my way. And I've really had to adjust to that too. We have to be flexible every single day. I'll spare you my really long story, but as I was telling you, just got back from spring break and we drove. And as you were talking about the little decisions, we made a lot of them along the way. We brought our little 8.5 pound dog. So we had her in the car and we had my son in the wheelchair in the back. And we had just got this new van ramp with a ramp. And we had some issues with it on the way home. And my husband had some health issues on the way home. And so it was the longest couple of days of my life.
Wow.
And we had to try to be as flexible as we could to make it home from Florida to Michigan. And actually, as I said a couple of times, my parents are moving from Florida to North Carolina. So this was our last trip to visit them in Florida. And the last day of our vacation, we were at their house. And this is when some of this stuff started to happen to us. And I really had to step in and maybe not be flexible, but say, this is how we're going to handle things right now. And it doesn't look the way that we thought it was going to look. And we all have to deal with it. So again, timely and interesting that you brought up that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's held me in good stead over the years. And look, you start off thinking you're going to go one direction and it goes another way. Something else happens. And
Yes.
that's the way life is. Something else happens.
Yes, for sure. So I want to get back to what you were saying. I really love that small decisions. You made it very clear. When you are talking through changes in your life, how does it go with your wife? Are you guys similar, different, complementary? How does it work when you're making these types of decisions together?
We're very similar in our values and our behavioral style. Since I work with other humans, I work with disc profiles and motivators and things like that. So we're very similar, which can be a help and a hazard. Um, for a long time, we were outgoing, friendly, and all that kind of stuff. And two people who are outgoing, friendly, and have a lot of fun are probably going to die broke, but they're going to have a good time along the way.
Yeah.
Um, we both got into our own businesses, and she and I became a little bit more dominant, a little bit more direct, and that kind of stuff, which always leads to a lot of fun. There's I don't know if you do this, but a lot of married couples seem to, because I've heard a lot about it on Facebook and Reels and all that kind of stuff. It's fights over rearranging the dishwasher.
Yes. I don't think we do that, but because I'm opposite of most wives, I am a hot mess with the dishwasher, so I'm not the one that gets mad at my husband, but go ahead.
Well, but most people, what happens is you think there's a way to do the dishwasher. Um, it took a lot of years to be able to laugh about it.
Isn't that funny? Yes.
Yeah, and my daughter who lives with us, she says, "I don't even bother because
I'm
I
not
know
even
you're."
touching it.
I, yeah, I know you're going to be rearranging it.
I guess I could say the same thing with the groceries. I'm not good with the dishwater washer, but the groceries, my husband won't even bother to put them away because he knows they're not gonna be in the right place. So, I guess we all do have those little things like that. That's
Yeah,
too funny.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Does your husband put away the laundry?
No, I wouldn't want him to.
Well, so being a good husband, I obviously my wife won't let me touch the washing machine or dryer. Um, that's her deal. But because I'm invariably going to screw it up, and I'm sure I'm going to put the wrong color in with the right color and all that kind of stuff. But once it's folded and put it away, I put it away where I think it's supposed to be, and she puts it away where she thinks it's supposed to be, and sometimes we rearrange it, and
Yeah,
life goes on.
I have a good friend who she's really good at delegating to her husband. Like, "Yeah, go ahead, do this, do that, do this." I'm like, "I wouldn't do that," and she thinks I'm crazy. Like, "Make him do these things. It's easy." And I'm like, "No, there's some things I don't want him to touch." So that is funny.
We
Wives,
we learned. I learned from years of family therapy that the more in control you think you are, the less in
the
control
less
you
in
actually
control.
are.
Isn't that very true?
That
It's
is
very,
that's very
very
true.
true. Well, interesting. I told you we were gonna learn a lot from you. So there's 2 things I wanna bring up. One is you're making me think. I was talking to a therapist. I had some big things happen at the beginning of the year with my son, and the listeners know because I shared the story, but we got into a little bit of an accident, and he broke both of his legs. So he's in a
Oh God.
wheelchair, and he breaks both of his legs. We did not hit another car, but I had to slam on my brakes, and it just wasn't good. So I was having a lot of anxiety and emotional stress during that time. Talk about regret. I had some guilt for driving and whatever. Anyway, I started talking to a therapist, and she brought up this point, and it has stuck with me because you have this moment where something traumatic happens. And then, to your point, you can't control anything but how you react to it. But sometimes when it's traumatic, your reaction is crazy right away. And she talked about we wish we could actually pause from the minute of the incident or the traumatic situation to how you react. You wish you could pause and say, okay, this is how I want to react. And I'm not good at that. Not I'm learning most people aren't. If something major happens, it's hard to say, "Oh, I'm gonna be calm and handle it like this." Sometimes you fly off the handle and you don't handle it the way you would have liked, and you look back and you say, "Oh, wish I would have done that differently." What do you think of that? Like, if somebody comes to you and says, "I need to react better to things that happen." What are your thoughts on that?
A couple thoughts. We are who we are. We can control what we can control, and sometimes you just got to let go. Um, do you have regrets about the way that you reacted? Maybe. Um, but in the moment, what do you do? I just you try to handle things the best way you possibly can,
Right.
and that's all anybody asks is how are you going to do things the best way you possibly can. I had a coaching client years ago that he had somebody that worked for him, that he was the owner of a company and CEO, and he had somebody that worked for him that was his favorite person to beat up. And there were a couple times when he called me and he said, I just blew up. And I know when he blows up, it isn't pretty. And I was coaching the person as well. So I was coaching both of them. Um, so it happens. It's not pretty. It's not, you wish it wouldn't happen. You know that there are going to be reverberations out from that. Um, but here's a kind of an interesting thing. My wife and I handled conflict in completely different ways, and that that was a lot of therapy to be able to figure out how to do that. I think we both have changed, and I think we both have changed the way we handle disagreements and conflict now. Um, but it was a process.
Yes, like everything, right. Yes. Well, before we end off, I always give my guests an opportunity to maybe leave something, as I said at the beginning, a nugget or a piece of advice. You've been through health issues, you've moved across state, you've lived in different places, you worked a very stressful job, you switched to owning your own business. I mean, you could talk about dealing with adversity and changes in your path all day long. But what are some things you would share with people that are maybe contemplating, like, should I try something new? Should I change my job? Should I move to another state? Should I seek family therapy for me and my wife or my spouse and my kids? What are some pieces of advice you want to leave with our listeners?
Yes, just do it. Just do it.
Go, just do it.
Yeah, and don't regret it.
Yes, I like
Don't
that.
look
Don't
back
regret it.
on regret it. If you want to move, move. If there's a reason that you are, if you're moving out of a high tax state into a better situation. You mentioned your parents moving to North Carolina. That North Carolina is a fairly low tax state. Maybe their living situation will get better. Um, After a while, and I would say the first big move was a little bit more difficult, but after a while, you just get used to it,
Mhm.
and you just make up your mind that it's going to be great. Here's what moving does to you, and I'm not talking about moving just out of state or moving your residence, but I'm talking about moving mentally.
Mhm.
Changing jobs, and if you're in a job that you don't like, get a new job. Find a new way of doing things. I didn't have a lot of money to start a business, and I started a business anyway. And for the first 5 years, it was really rough. I took on a lot of debt, um, but I stuck with it, and I made it work. And all that debt I ended up paying off, and it worked. So if you can think to yourself, first of all, Semper Gumby, things aren't going to always turn out the way that you plan them. Second of all, failure is not an option. And look, we fail every day. We fail in more ways than every day. We fail. You mentioned your reaction to a situation. That was a fail. Sometimes, as the way of putting it is, sometimes it's an epic fail. But even epic fails, you get over it, and you are not a failure when you fail. So failure is a verb, not a noun. And the only way we learn and the only way we grow is to fail. So if you listen to all the sad makers, if you listen to all the people that are telling you you're doing it wrong, your attitude is going to go out the window. But if you say, look, failure is not an option, we're going to move ahead, and the outcome may not look like what I want it to look like, but the outcome will look like something. And that's the important part. So, failure in the big capital F is not an option, but we're going to fail along the way to get us to the final outcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So, Andrew, where are you going to move? Are you going to come to North Carolina and be with your parents?
I'm probably not gonna move because our house is perfect for my son, but I'm not gonna be afraid for my parents moving. It's like they're gonna figure it out, and what's the worst that happens? If they don't like it, they'll figure something else out. And they're capable and they've moved quite a few times, so they're not afraid of it. And you've opened my mind a little bit more to what they're doing. And it's funny because most of what you're saying are things that I would say to other people, but I kind of feel like today's session is a bit of a therapy session for me. So thank you.
You
Usually I
know,
say my guests are the ones that are getting the therapy, but today it's me. I actually was talking with a potential guest this morning and I said my 20 soon to be 20-year-old son is in college and he's pursuing finance and he's trying to understand what he wants to do with that degree and is he going to get an internship, and so he's doing all of these different things, and I'm the one that's like, just do whatever, try things out, experience whatever so you can find out exactly what you want to do. And my husband is the one that's like, slow down, be analytical, ask the questions. So I'm the first person to tell people to just let go do things, do it the best you can. But when it comes to myself, sometimes I'm not as good at that. So it kind of helped me see it a little bit more today on this session with all that you've done in your life and your
if
experience.
if
So,
you if you like to read, there's a book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Dukes, and Annie was a professional poker
oh,
player.
I know who she is. Yeah, we play
Oh, you
poker.
do?
We used to I'm like, I know that name. We used to watch World Series of Poker all the time, and yeah. So, thinking in bets, talking about betting. Okay.
Yeah, it's an easy read. It's a fairly quick read, and by the way, the she opens up with the decision of the coach of the Seattle Seahawks to throw a pass in the Super Bowl when they were down on the 1 yard line that got intercepted by the Patriots, and
Instead of
and they
running
lost
it
the
in,
game.
yes, yep.
Exactly. Now, when she talks about decisions, she talks about that was a great decision, but a poor outcome. And so a lot of times we judge our decisions based on the outcome rather than was it a good decision at the time. And I think that is so cool because there are so many decisions we make in the moment, and whether we're analytical or whether we're emotional. She also makes the point that we are emotional creatures. we
Yes.
don't we don't make analytical decisions. We make decisions emotionally and then back into them analytically, and some people are just more adept at backing into them analytically. They come to it quicker. so
Yeah.
so all decisions are emotional decisions. She makes that point in the book. The decision that he made was a good one, because if it was incomplete, then they still could run it in with Marshawn Lynch. He got hung out to dry in the press, and everybody was calling for his head because they thought it was a bad decision. It was a great decision. It was just a bad outcome.
Yeah, and I'll definitely read that because it happens a lot in poker too. That I'll always say, my husband and I have very different mindsets. We actually play a monthly game, and we play very differently. I play very emotionally, and you'll make a bet, you'll try to do something, and if the outcome doesn't work, then it's easy for people to say, "Why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have made that decision." But if the outcome went well, they would have been like, "Wow, that's so great that you made that call and that you did that." And I always tell them that because they'll say after the fact, "Why did you call that? Why did you play that hand?" And I'll say, "Well, if I won it, you would have thought I was amazing." So, yeah, this little decision and you're right, you made the decision not knowing the outcome. So you already were invested. And then as soon as the outcome doesn't go your way, then you question, everybody questions what you did. But at the time, it was what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the analogy too she makes in there, talking about chess versus cards, because cards, first of all, you're playing the emotions of your
Of
of your
people.
the
Mhm.
people you're playing.
Mhm.
Second of all, they can do whatever they can do. So, if they're holding a pair and they think that's great and they're going to bluff it, It's not like in chess where there are certain prescribed moves and there's only so many certain prescribed moves, and that's why computers do really good at chess but really crappy at poker, because it's all of the mental things that go on in poker. That's great that you play.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I love it, but it's very interesting too because so many I play with mainly men. I don't really think there's been a woman that's played with us in quite a while. And they all think they're analytical, like, oh, the pot odds and the numbers. And it's like, okay, to a point, but you're also playing emotionally too, because you made the decision to go all in with 2-7 in your hands. You put a little emotion in there, no matter how smart or strategic you think you are.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share that with all of them. But anyway, so it's like I knew it would be. It's been such a joy talking with you, but I offer my guests the opportunity to share what they're doing. So I definitely want to talk about your books and I want to share where people could kind of follow you. So feel free to plug and I will put it in the show notes too.
Thank you. Thank you. Scholzassociates.com is my website. And the cool thing is there's a freebie on the website. It's if you go to books and then what's Chip reading, it has about 140 books in there that I've written reviews on, and they're books that I've read, and some of them I can recommend, some of them I cannot recommend. Maybe you'll agree with my review, maybe you won't, but that's okay as long as you read the books, and there's some great books in there. Some books that you probably wouldn't think of as self development. Like there's one called Business Follies or Business Mistakes. It was written back in the 60s and talks about the Edsels and the first computers and that kind of stuff. I love that. And it was a book that I was recommended by Bill Gates in an article that I read. And it was such a different kind of book, but that's freebie. Books are on Amazon. Small Decisions, Big Shifts, which came out last October. Every Dog Has His Day, which just came out about a month ago, and I've got one coming out in October called Handoffs, which is a story of a family business and some of the issues that family businesses face. So I'm looking forward to that. Spotify and Kobo and BarnesandNoble.com. You can find the audiobook on there. And so, I hope you enjoy the conversation and I hope you engage me in conversation because I'd love to hear. The one thing that's been fun about Every Dog Has Its Day because it's reflections on life, love, and the lathe, and you don't often hear life, love, and lathe all in the same sentence. But the thing I love about that is I've written a number of books, but this one I get phone calls where people say, "Wow, I just thank you for sharing that," and it was such an easy read, and I got such deep things out of it. I've had 4 or 5 of those phone calls since it's been out, and if I'm getting those phone calls, there's probably a lot more people that are thinking it. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Yes, I will put all of this information in the show notes as well so our listeners can find all of that information. But yeah, it has been, I've said this a few times, joy. Joy is my word, and it's been quite a joy to speak with you this morning. And I do like many of my guests share very specific moments in time where something happened to them and it changed their whole outlook on life. But I do like the conversations where we can just recognize that there's a million things that happen to all of us that change the course of our life or put us on a path that we didn't expect. And it's just what you do with it, what you do after that, that makes a big difference. And I love when people share that so that we can all learn and continue to grow in this short
It's
life.
not it's not how you stumble, it's how you recover.
Oh, I like that.
Everybody loves a good redemption story. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Shawshank Redemption, just
Oh,
because
I love that movie.
it's a good redemption story. We just love those redemption stories, and so hey,
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chip, for being a guest on the Show Me the Way podcast. I know you've got a lot going on, so I appreciate you giving us your time. I know my listeners are going to learn from you, and it's just been so great getting to know you. I'm buying a book for my dad, and I'm going to tell him to find you when he moves to North Carolina.
please do. I'd love it, and I would love to show them around the lathe.
Okay. I'm going to tell him that. He needs some projects. He needs some new things to get interested in when he's in North Carolina. So
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate it. I've had a great time, and I appreciate your time as well.
thank you. Thank you for joining me for the Show Me the Way podcast. I truly appreciate you tuning in to today's episode about overcoming adversity and finding your path. I hope it brought you new insights, empowered you with perspective, and inspired you to find joy in your journey. If this episode touched your heart, don't forget to leave a quick review as it will help us reach and motivate more people. Until next time, keep seeking the light and showing the way.